All right. Got a brand new friend on the program this morning, and only appropriate that we have David Brant on the show because we just finished talking about Tree City USA celebrations and legacy tree cities all across the state. And now we're going to talk about, in a much more concentrated way, a very important initiative that's going on, a forest preservation initiative being led by the Aspetuck Land Trust in partnership with the Wilton Land Conservation Trust. This is going to be part of a larger regional land preservation effort called the Hudson to Housatonic Regional Conservation Partnership. And we've got the right guy to talk about it. David Brant is the executive director of the Aspetuck Land Trust, and we'll welcome him now. David, thanks for joining us on the program.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So this is pretty exciting news, not something that happens every day for any organization to suddenly find out that they have the opportunity to sort of be the puzzle piece that is the nose of the Mona Lisa, so to speak. You guys are going to tie some really other important components together to not only strengthen and improve the health of the environment in the areas of this land block, this forest block in the Aspetuck Land Trust, but also have an impact on a much larger program. Before we get into discussion with that, though, just tell us a little bit about yourself and the Aspetuck Land Trust.
Sure. Well, Aspetuck Land Trust is a private, nonprofit land conservation group. We were founded in 1966 in Westport by Barlow Cutler Watton, who was trying to prevent a hospital from being built on a salt marsh in downtown Westport in the early 1960s. And those were the days when people used to fill in salt marshes because they smelled and, there were a lot of mosquitoes in them. Mm-hmm. And so she thought otherwise and organized an effort to prevent that hospital, a hospital from being built on a salt marsh, and from there went on to start the Conservation Commission in Westport and the Aspetuck Land Trust. I think she realized the need for land trusts, in coming in and preserving land, and especially land that was at threat from development. So we've since grown to be a 4-town land trust. We serve 4 towns: Westport, Easton, Fairfield, and Weston, and we have about 150 properties in those towns. We do own a little bit of land in Reading and Wilton and Bridgeport. We have about 1,100 members, people that support us annually through their annual financial contributions to support the work that we do to preserve open space. Mm.
I remember back, 20 plus years ago when I was engaged in the Oxford Land Trust, and it was just, a few dozen people who really cared about the property and, did a little fundraiser mailer every year and an activity or two for folks. But your organization, the Aspetuck Land Trust, is very, very community-centric, and you have gone far beyond the borders of the land trust properties and forests. You actually engage with all home and property owners in all 4 of these communities on land preservation and environmental health initiatives, right?
Well, that's our plan. So we preserve land, right? And but we don't own all the land in our towns, and in between all of these preserved open spaces that we own, or the town might own, or Connecticut Audubon Society might own, our homeowners. And homeowners are landowners. And how they take care of their yards and their properties, the things they do in their own yards, really can have an impact, on the ecology of the area and our environment. So everything flows downhill. So if somebody's using herbicides and pesticides, fertilizers, that's all going right down into the sound. So what we're hoping to do is, as we're putting our boots on the ground to try to preserve these last big parcels of land in our towns and connect them all into a greenway, which I'd love to talk a little bit more about. We have big plans to create basically an 18,000-acre greenway that runs through our 4 towns. All those homeowners in that greenway can contribute by changing up how they take care of their own yards and make a real difference.
So at what point are you in this greenway establishment?
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been working on a forest block project in Weston and Wilton, where we're trying to buy 350 acres of land to preserve a much larger forest block that's 2,000 plus acres in size. We are in the process of identifying similar properties, large properties in our other towns, Fairfield, Westport, and Easton, and then basically mapping out where the greenway will go within those four towns. So we're still in the planning phase, but it's a great initiative that's going to be able to, I think, excite people about the land trust and the work we're doing and how they can contribute. I think people are really looking for ways that they can have an impact. And, you know, we hear a lot of bad news these days about global warming and this and that. Well, you know, it can be as simple as changing up the way you do lawn care to, you know, do something a little more sustainable, maybe organic. Plant a pollinator plant so you can support butterflies and bees. Instead of mowing up to the stream in your backyard, so your lawn goes right up to the stream, well, what about maybe making a little buffer there? So there's simple things that people can do that can really have a big impact. So if we're successful, you know, we haven't laid out kind of our goals yet in terms of where we want to go and in terms of, you know, how many people we want to switch to organic land care, for example. But you can imagine if we have 1,000 people in our four-town region that are changing up how they take care of their yards, that can really add up and make a big difference.
Well, it's pretty exciting. Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking with David Brant. He's the director of the Aspetuck Land Trust. They are engaged, as you're hearing, in a number of preservation and environmental enhancement initiatives, including the Weston Wilton Forest Block program, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But, David, the other thing is, you know, it's great that not only are the folks in the communities taking the land trust work seriously, but so is the state of Connecticut. They recently gave you a grant for a modest preservation initiative, didn't they?
They did. We bought 38 acres in Weston, which is a part of this Weston Wilton Forest Block initiative, and the state gave us a grant for upwards of $170,000 for that property, which we purchased for around $370,000. So, you know, it's wonderful that there's still funding out there, you know, for land preservation. You know, it does have a positive impact on, you know, on our communities.
And we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the engagement of one of the world's greatest philanthropists, Paul Newman, Connecticut native, now, of course, long passed away, but still, you know, as he always aspired to do, providing framework and things for future generations to enjoy. And in fact, he played an important role in establishing what I guess was the largest parcel the Aspetuck group now oversees.
That's right. That's the 1,009-acre Trout Brook Valley Conservation Area in Easton and Weston. We have over 20 miles of trails. It's a place that you can really feel like you're getting away right within Fairfield County. And we purchased a big piece of that property in 1999, and Paul Newman came out and supported it. He showed up at a Easton community meeting with his daughter Lissy, who's on our board today, and his involvement, I think, really galvanized the community and got people excited about saving that open space. And you know, I think the point is that, you know, you may not be Paul Newman, but you can make a difference too, you know, by making a donation to Aspetuck Land Trust or any nonprofit, you know, in our community, or planting pollinators in your yard, or changing up to organic land care. You know, it's really, individuals can have a big impact, and he certainly had a big impact on our ability to buy Trout Brook Valley, which we paid $11.3 million for. And the state was also a significant contributor to that project as well. But we have over 10,000 people a year that enjoy that open space. So, you know, people are, there's a lot of public benefit that people are benefiting from that open space.
Yeah, it's also important, David, I think, to remind folks that this is not just for the trees. It's for everything indigenous and native that live under it, and that is also brings wildlife preservation into the picture, right?
That's right. I mean, we preserve open space, and we preserve open space for public benefit. People hike, they bike, they pick blueberries on our properties, but there's also wildlife that live on these spaces too, and so it's very important that they have habitats and room to roam, which is one of the reasons why these forest block projects are so important, because it's one thing to have an open space here or an open space there, but it's another when you're talking about creating a much more contiguous kind of land base that gives wildlife room to wander. So these wildlife, they like varying habitats. They like these large open spaces in which to roam. They have these disbursement corridors. One good example is bears. I mean, we have now bears down in Fairfield County, and it's really important to have this protected open space so they have space to roam.
Excellent. Well, let's in the last few minutes that we have with you, David, let's switch gears back to the Weston Wilton Forest Block, and not just the important role this would play as a standalone purchase, but also the role it will eventually play in this Hudson to Housatonic River initiative.
Yeah. Well, the Hudson to Housatonic Initiative is a regional conservation partnership, which is basically a group of land trusts that are coming together to talk about land preservation between the Hudson in New York and the Housatonic in Connecticut. So, Aspetuck Land Trust is a regional land trust kind of within that larger land area. So we're trying to figure out things in our own 4 towns, and in our case also working with Wilton Land Conservation Trust. But it's important to have kind of a larger view of the landscape when it comes to preserving land. So that Hudson Housatonic Initiative is really encouraging land trusts to talk with each other across town lines to preserve larger swaths of land that form kind of a connected corridor between the Hudson to Housatonic. And this is a tough landscape to preserve land in because it's exurban, suburban. We're not up in northern Connecticut or someplace out in the middle of Montana, where there's thousands and thousands of acres. So it's a little trickier to preserve land in our neck of the woods. But it's really impossible to preserve any land if you're not proactive and talking to other land trusts and kind of working hard in your communities to identify, these connectivity opportunities, which is what we're doing in Weston Wilton. But the Hudson Housatonic Initiative is a great initiative that is going to get more land preserved.
And this Weston Wilton Forest Block Initiative was just announced a little over a month ago by you and the Aspetuck Land Trust. But I'm very much looking forward into making this the first of at least a 2-part chat with you and perhaps some other members. Maybe we'll come down and actually visit with you on site so we can be in and see through the eyes of our radio voices what's going on down there as this initiative progresses and you engage more homeowners who are in that sort of Housatonic to Hudson corridor and see how that's all going and talk a little bit more about that in the future. But for now, this is exciting enough, and you guys have your plates full down there at the Aspetuck Land Trust. We want to let people know if they want to learn more about this, perhaps send a donation, visit one of the properties and do some hiking or more of them. They can go to aspetucklandtrust.org. That's ASPETUCK, landtrust.org. Our guest this morning for this first in a couple of visits, I hope, is David Brant. He is the executive director of Aspetuck Land Trust, and great stuff you got going down there, David, and we're so glad we could make this a companion piece to our Tree City USA segment with the DEEP, and I look forward to talking with you again, hopefully by the end of the summer, and see how this is all shaping up. So thanks so much.